I want you to think of ChatGPT and these large language models as tools that you can use to give your ideas form, to give your thoughts, realization, to be able to explore lots of different concepts and be able to refine them over interactions with the tool. I don't want you to think of these tools as something that you use to just write essays or answer questions. That's really missing the capabilities of the tools. These are tools that really allow you to do fascinating things. So now I'm going to try to give you an example of this, to hopefully motivate you that these tools have immense capabilities and that those capabilities can allow you to do things that would be very difficult to do otherwise. So what is a task that I thought of that would be something that we could all relate to? And I thought about my family, and I thought about this crazy idea. We have this great restaurant from Uzbekistan that's in Nashville. We have a great restaurant from Ethiopia. We've actually got lots of great Ethiopian restaurants. And I thought to myself, what would it look like to create a meal plan that was based on a fusion of cuisine from Uzbekistan and Ethiopia? What would that look like? And in the past, I've eaten keto, so could we try to make it kind of keto? Because I still kind of like to limit my carbs. And at the end of the day, realistically, I'm going to have to buy all the ingredients for this. And if they're not easily accessible at the grocery store down the street from me, I'm probably not going to cook the meals. So I thought, well, let's go to ChatGPT and see if it can help us with this problem, if it can help us prototype what this meal plan might look like. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, please create a meal plan for my family that is based on a fusion of food from Ethiopia and Uzbekistan. I want to eat keto and up to 2,000 calories per day. Pick dishes where the ingredients are easy to get from an average US grocery store. Now, this is a hard problem, right? I don't think that there's a human on the planet that could easily answer this question. And if they are, I probably could not find them. It would probably cost me too much to hire them. And they certainly couldn't do this as fast as I'm about to get it done for me. So I asked ChatGPT to do this for me, and ChatGPT says, here's a sample meal plan that combines flavors from Ethiopia and Uzbekistan while also being keto-friendly and within a 2,000 calorie per day limit. Breakfast, scrambled eggs with sauteed onions, tomatoes, and Ethiopian berbere spice. Now notice what it does. It puts in parentheses, it says, made with chili powder, paprika, garlic powder, ginger, cumin, and coriander. Now what it's signaling is berbere spice is something you can get at the average US grocery store. All of these spices are easy to obtain from a normal US grocery store. So not only is it answering my question, it's giving me an Ethiopian breakfast dish, it's giving me information that I'm going to be able to get these spices. Now, I don't know enough about Ethiopian cuisine to know if this is a really accurate dish. It may not be, it may be sort of inspired by it and very Americanized, but for me and what I'm trying to do, this is pretty impressive. Then goes on to say, lunch, Uzbek-style lamb kebabs with grilled vegetables, bell peppers, zucchini, eggplant, and a side of cucumber and tomato salad dressed with olive oil and lemon juice. Now you notice all of this is pretty keto-friendly too. Now some people could take issue with the onions, but it's a really good first start of giving this crazy idea I have form. Now, it may have errors in it, it may not be perfect, but I could go and work with this and refine it and start improving it. And that's one of the things I want you to think about throughout this course is don't think of this as a one-off, I give it a question and I look at the answer and I say it's good or bad. No. So I went back to it and I thought, well, one of the things that I'm really missing from this is I don't know how much to eat. So I said, can you give me an approximate serving size for myself for each dish that is within my 2,000 calorie limit? And ChatGPT says, sure, here are approximate serving sizes for each dish based on a 2,000 calorie per day limit. Breakfast, scrambled eggs with sauteed onions, tomatoes, and Ethiopian berbere spice mix. And then it has in parentheses 2 eggs, half a cup of onions, half a cup of tomatoes, 1 teaspoon of berbere spice mix. Served with a side of sliced avocado, 1/4 medium avocado. And it goes on to give me now serving sizes for each of these different dishes. Now, again, I didn't go and I didn't take it into some calorie calculator and look at the macros and check if it really fit my diet because I was just fascinated about prototyping this idea, exploring this concept. And I could keep refining it. I could keep looking and improving it, asking it to break down things, really analyzing and making sure it exactly fits what I'm looking for. But instead, I want to do something kind of different. I'm going to go and continue this thread of conversation, this crazy idea that I had, and give it a little more form. And so what I thought about is if I was really going to take this crazy idea into my family, I'd have to think about my 9-year-old son. My wife and I are more adventurous eaters, but my 9-year-old, he's not always going to want to eat everything that we come up with. And so I thought, well, what could I do to help him get excited about trying these things out? And so I thought, I can go back to ChatGPT and I can try to get ChatGPT's help with this. So I said, ChatGPT, my son is 9. Sometimes he won't try new dishes. To make this culinary adventure more fun for him, can you create a short Pokemon battle story to go with each dish? And if you're not familiar with Pokemon, it's trading cards and a game and a cartoon. My son loves it. I will read the stories with him before dinner to get him excited about trying the new food. Make sure the story ends with a cliffhanger that will motivate him to try the new food. Now, maybe I could find somebody who could give me a meal plan based on Uzbek cuisine and Ethiopian cuisine, but and make it keto and do all those things and look it up. I'm not sure they could do it anywhere near as fast, but now we're really moving into territory where it's going to be hard to find a single human being. And to get somebody to do all this is going to be expensive. And I'm doing this in a matter of minutes. So what does ChatGPT say? Certainly. Here are some short Pokemon battle stories to go with each dish. Then we had the breakfast dish with the berbere spice, and it says, sorry, Pikachu and his friends were exploring the wilds of Ethiopia, and they were suddenly ambushed by a group of sneaky Pokemon thieves. And it goes on to have this berbere dragon that they're battling, and then it says, in the end, they emerged victorious, but not before the dragon left a fiery spice that imbued their breakfast eggs with a flavorful kick. Can you help Pikachu and his friends defeat the berbere dragon and enjoy this spicy breakfast? That's pretty amazing, right? We've gone from a meal plan to now help my son get excited about eating this by mixing in some concept that he's really excited about, and it's actually produced a cliffhanger. Is this the best cliffhanger? Maybe, maybe not. But does it matter? No, because I'm rapidly sort of experimenting with my ideas. I'm trying to get my thought form. I'm trying to understand what this would look like, and I could go and I could refine it and improve it further, but it's already done a pretty good job. I could probably take this and read it to my son and have him more excited about trying the dish. So then I thought, well, let's take this crazy idea further. So we're going to be sitting at the dinner table. We're going to read these crazy stories that ChatGPT has generated for me to try to get my son excited about eating these dishes. I thought, what else do we do at the dinner table that I could weave into this? And I thought, well, one of the things we do is we talk about what my son is learning at school. And one of the things he loves is he loves learning math and playing math games. I thought, well, is there a way I can integrate that into this whole crazy idea? And I said, ChatGPT, I would like you to play a math game with my 9-year-old to teach him about division with fractions and nutrition. Ask him questions one at a time involving Pokemon in these topics and make it into a game. When he wins, the Pokemon win. Ask the first question. And ChatGPT says, great, let's play a fun math game involving Pokemon and nutrition. Question 1. Pikachu and his friends are planning a meal that includes half a cup of cooked rice, but they need to divide it evenly among 3 Pokemon. How much rice will each Pokemon get? And it gives him a hint, and it says, if you get stuck, feel free to ask me for more hints, for guidance. And what does it do? It then waits for my son to respond. So we go and we type in the answer. We type in 1/6. Now notice, before we were asking it questions, and now it's asked us a question. We've told it to create this math game. It's now asked me or my son a question. I'm typing in 1/6 as the answer. And now ChatGPT says, good job, that's correct. Each Pokemon will get 1/6 a cup of cooked rice. We got this answer by dividing 1/2 by 3, which gives us, and it works out the math for us. And so we went from, a meal plan, this crazy idea of a meal plan that's based on food from Uzbekistan and Ethiopia that's keto-friendly, that I can get at an average grocery store. We then added serving sizes or portions to it. We then took that and we got it to generate Pokemon battle stories with cliffhangers that would help my son get excited about eating these dishes. And then I created a game, a math game based on nutrition and Pokemon to go along with this to make it even more fun. And then I thought, well, what else can we do this? I mean, let's really give this thought some form at the end. We've gotten the meal plan, we've gotten the stories, we've got this game. Can we give the game real form? And so I used some of my domain knowledge as a computer scientist to say, let's create code for this. So we're actually going to produce software for it. So I said, let's create code for this in Python, but I want it to be a web application. And I'm not going to go through all the details because they are domain specific. They use my knowledge of computer science. But the key thing is that ChatGPT then generates actual software, the code for software for this. I'm not going through all of it, but the important piece of it is when we get to the end of it, we actually have real working software that I could run on a computer to play this math game with my son. And so you can see that we took some simple idea and we rapidly prototyped it into all kinds of different forms. And at any point in time, we could go and we could further refine one of the forms. So we could take the meal plan that didn't have information about how much to eat, portions, and we could add that into it. We could reshape it into a completely different form. We could then eventually get to the end and take some form that we created and take it out of the language model and turn it into software. And so that capability of taking our ideas and rapidly iterating and prototyping with them, that's just one example of the type of thing that we can do with these large language models like ChatGPT. Now, I hope this example helps to get you inspired about the capabilities of what you're going to learn to do within this course. Tap into really complex capabilities of ChatGPT, but you can also do this with other large language models. And the way we tap into these capabilities is by using a pattern that we can use when we're writing prompts to get into these really interesting abilities of the large language models. Now, if you know these patterns, and we'll talk about them in detail in this course, you'll be more effective in writing prompts. You'll be able to do things that other people won't be able to do as easily. Now, I'm going to give you an example. It's going to use something called the persona pattern. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about the persona pattern at this point, but basically it's a pattern that we see all over the place. You'll see lots of different examples of this pattern out there on the internet where people talk about using it to do lots and lots of different things. But the basic idea is you're going to ask the large language model, in this case ChatGPT, you're going to ask it to act like a particular persona. So now what does that mean? It means like you're going to ask it to act like a person or some inanimate object or an animal or some system. There's all kinds of ways that you can use this. It's really, really interesting. But we're going to use it in this example to tap into a persona that is close to me, but one that I know nothing about the domain. So one of the really useful things about the persona pattern is you can imagine if you needed to go phone an expert to get help on some problem, you know who you would call, but you don't know exactly what they would tell you or how they would analyze your problem. And so I wanted something where I know an expert that I could go to. In this case, my wife is a speech-language pathologist, so I could have her look at the output and tell me how good it was. But I know nothing about being a speech-language pathologist or how to do their job. So I imagined that when my son was 3, he was not saying things properly. And so I went to ChatGPT and I said, act as a speech-language pathologist. I'm going to tell you what a 3-year-old said, and you will write an assessment for me. The child said, I need way boy. Now you can imagine this might just me being a parent hearing it incorrectly, the child's not pronouncing things correctly. I don't know the right way to even capture this, to even express what's being said in words, the right way to do all of this. So this is a complex problem from my perspective. Like, I don't know how to express all of this in language, even to ask the question properly, but I know I would go to a speech-language pathologist and I would describe this to him. Try to think of something that sounded like something my son might have said at that point in time. So what does ChatGPT say? Well, you notice first off, its output looks like a report. It says subject assessment of a 3-year-old speech sample, child speech sample, I need way boy, has it in quotation marks, and it says assessment. Based on the provided speech sample, it appears that the child may be experiencing some phonological and articulation errors, which are common in children around this age. I don't know what phonological or articulation errors are. I would not have known to ask ChatGPT for these things, but based on this pattern that I'm using, this persona pattern, I'm tapping into this capability for ChatGPT to look at this and know what the right things are to tell me. So it says there's phonological and articulation errors. So it says the child's utterance appears to have errors in consonant production and possibly some difficulty with syllable structure. And so it says consonant errors. It seems that the child is having difficulty with the production of some consonant sounds, specifically the N and L sounds. The child said mead instead of need and woy instead of toy. And then it has in parentheses its assumption. It says assuming the intended words were need and toy. Because you can remember my speech sample was I need way woy, which my wife told me wasn't a very good example, may not be something a child would actually say. Despite that, it's still figuring out this is probably what, if that's really what the child said, this is probably what they were intending to say, and it's figuring that out. And then it's telling me they're having consonant errors. They're replacing, they're specifically having trouble with N and L sounds. Then it goes on to say syllable structure. The child's production of the word way may indicate some difficulty with the correct syllable structure. It is possible that the child intended to say play, but produced way instead, which suggests a substitution of the initial consonant cluster PL with a single consonant W. This could be an example of a simplification process called cluster reduction. I would not have known how to ask ChatGPT to see if there was a problem with syllable structure or cluster reduction, but I used this pattern of saying act as, and I said act as a speech language pathologist, and now I'm getting a rich output that I wouldn't even know how to ask for. And then it goes on to say, because by the way, when I went, if you want to do something really unpopular, ask ChatGPT to produce an output that looks like it's doing somebody's job. And that's always a way to be very popular. So I did this with my wife one morning, and my wife was not very happy because she was trying to get ready to go to work, and here I am, saying ChatGPT's producing things that look like what you produce. And one of her things that she said to me was, if that was a 3-year-old, I'd be telling the parents they probably don't need to worry. Children's speech is continuing to evolve. And I'm paraphrasing what she said. She said much more eloquently. But she was like, it's just giving you way overblown analysis of this. And I said, yeah, but ChatGPT says that too at the end. Considering the child's age, it is important to remember that some speech sound errors are developmentally appropriate and may resolve on their own with time. And of course, by that time, she was walking out the door because she really wasn't ready to sit around in the morning and listen to me tell her that ChatGPT is doing what a speech language pathologist does. Do I think it's going to take her job? No. But do I think it has really vast and powerful capabilities that we can tap into with the right patterns? Absolutely. And do I think it gives us the ability to focus on the things that maybe we really want to spend our time on? My wife loves working with kids. She loves interacting with them and trying to understand how to help them. Writing reports, maybe, I'm not sure, don't want to speak too much for my wife, but I would guess it's maybe not her most favorite part of the job. She really loves working with the kids and trying to help the kids. And so you can imagine something like this where it allows her to focus more on the things that she really cares about in the real world. Maybe it can help her to give form to her thought around the child's needs and write these reports. And so I just hope that you'll see that with a little bit of the right structure in our prompts, we can create these really powerful ways of giving form to our ideas and our thoughts through large language models like ChatGPT. The fundamental thing that you want to know about these large language models is basically what they're doing is they're taking your input and they're trying to generate the next word. And then they'll take that word that they generate and they'll add it to what you originally gave it, and they'll try to generate the next word. This is the way to think of it. Now, there's a lot more detail than this, but think of it basically as it's trying to generate word by word the response to your input. Whatever your prompt is, they're going to try to generate word by word the next word that's going to be in the output until it gets to a point that it thinks it's generated enough, and then the last word is basically going to be the equivalent of stop. But it's not going to be something you're going to see. So what it's doing is basically producing words or tokens basically to respond to your prompt. And so what we're trying to do with large language models is we're trying to produce prompts that then cause it word by word to produce an output. Now, I want to show you a little bit about this and kind of give you some intuition of it. So if I go and I write, Mary had a little, and we stop right there. And if you're familiar with the nursery rhyme, Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. I'm giving it a prompt. And if I say Mary had a little, it's going and then completing it. It starts from my last statement, Mary had a little, and it's predicting the next word, which is lamb. Its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. It followed her to school one day, which was against the rule. It made the children laugh and play to see a lamb at school. And so the teacher turned it out, but still it lingered near, and it goes on until it stops. Now you notice what it's doing is my prompt triggered it to produce the next word, which was Mary had a little, was my prompt, so the next word was lamb. If I go and I say roses are red, what does ChatGPT do? It says violets are blue, sugar is sweet, and so are you. And it says this is a classic poem that's often used to express affection or admiration for someone. But the key thing to note is it's doing a next word prediction. I said roses are red, and it's picking up where I stopped and predicting the next word, which is violets. It's then adding that in and saying roses are red violets, and it's predicting are. It's then going back, adding that in, and it says roses are red, violets are, and it's predicting blue. And it's doing this over and over. And so it does really sophisticated, sort of incredible things. But underneath the hood, when it was trained and created, basically what was done was a large portion of the text and other things on the internet were taken, and it was taught basically over and over again. It was given a series of words, and it tried to predict the next word, except that it was given a paragraph of text from the internet, and they would show it part of the text, part of the sentence, and they would ask it to try to predict the next word in the sentence. And when it got it wrong, they would go and tweak the model, is what they call these things, large language models. And they're large because they were trained on so much data, and they have so many different parameters to them. They're these large language models. And what they're doing is they've learned patterns from our language, our human language that was out there on the internet. And they've basically learned the idea of, given what came before in the text, try to predict the next word. And then if I take that word and I add it back in, try to predict the next word. And so they trained these models to get really good at looking at the context of the information. Now, if you think about it, it has a lot of context. It's tapping into a pattern in the scene. I said Mary had a little, and it says lamb. It could have been Mary had a little bit of peanut butter on her shirt. But it's learned context, right? And that's part of what makes it work. It could be roses are red, daffodils are yellow, but it's learned this context, right? And so that's a part of the piece of this is it pays attention to words and uses that knowledge of the context. It's paying attention to different words that have come before, that are in the current sentence. It's paying attention to their relationships, and it's using that knowledge, that contextual knowledge, to try to predict the next word. And then it's taking the word that it produced, putting it back into the output, and trying to produce the next word and the next word. And this is the basis of things. Now, this will be helpful to know when we start thinking about the patterns of our prompts, when we think about conversations, when we think about what we can do to tap into this fundamental concept of predicting the next word. Now, one of the things to know with these models is they are rapidly evolving. We're seeing a lot in the news about ChatGPT, but there's lots of competing models that are coming out, and probably by the time you're watching this video, there'll be even more that I'm not going to mention or talk about because they didn't exist today when I started talking about it. So ChatGPT is certainly out there. There's a new version, GPT-4. There are models like Llama. There are variations on Llama like Alpaca. There's all kinds of different models that are coming out, and they're rapidly evolving. So more than likely, the discipline of prompt engineering, what you're learning, some parts of this are going to be hopefully timeless, but some parts of it will probably evolve and adapt as the different capabilities of these models evolve. Now, one of the things you'll want to do is always have that openness to experimentation, to creativity, and to trying things out. Remember, with these tools, we can rapidly prototype, we can rapidly explore things and try things out. And so we want to always tap into that. Now, one thing to note is that a lot of times these tools will produce output that is not the same every time. Now, it's possible that we could get the same output every time in certain cases, like roses are red, and now we get something different. And then if we went in and we did it again, we get something different. Now, notice that initially we got something that was what we kind of expected, but each time we're getting some variation on this. And this is something else that's useful to know, is these models aren't designed to do exactly the same thing every time. There's inherent randomness or variation in what they produce. And so this is something you need to know about when you're using the models. It's really powerful and useful if you use them the right way. If you aren't using the models the right way, or you're trying to fit them in for a task that they're not good for, you're gonna have to do a lot of work to deal with this fundamental aspect of it. But it's also an aspect that makes you want to think about this as, you should never expect these outputs to be perfect necessarily on the first try. It's a tool that can help you get an output that you want, but it's not necessarily perfect on the first try. There may be errors, there may be variation, and you need to build that into the processes and the other things that you build around the tool. So if you're gonna use it in your business, know that it may not give you exactly the same output every time. Now, there's ways to try to help limit what it does and try to guarantee that, but it's not guaranteed to do that. And so you want to know that. You want to know there's some randomness, there's some variation, which could be great when we're writing, prose with this, because we don't get exactly the same text every time, or else we would all have, exactly the same outputs, and we wouldn't be able to explore and try things. So knowing that is an helpful, thing to realize. Now, it's trained on a vast amount of data that came from the internet, knowing that its knowledge is based on the time that the training data was collected. So in the case of ChatGPT, it's cut off around 2021. Newer ones have more up-to-date knowledge bases, but they're always going to be behind in what they were trained on. So they were taught to predict the next word, and they learned from that idea of predicting the next word. And they learned to predict the next word in the context of a lot of different domains, be it speech-language pathology or programming, or be it about creating recipes, whatever it is. But their knowledge that they were trained on and the patterns that they learned cut off at some date. And so when we want to introduce and reason or work with new knowledge, we're always going to have to provide that as part of our prompt, as part of our input into the conversation, is that whatever additional information they need in order to reason. They're not necessarily continually updating. They can't retrain these things necessarily all the time. Now, it may change at some point, the technologies may change, but right now, today, know that when you need new additional information that wasn't publicly available on the internet, you're probably going to need to provide it in the prompt. Now, those are some of the key things that you'll need to know as we go forward in this course in order to help you write more effective prompts.